if you have a Subaru, you know they're pretty much front wheel drive all the time. As it sees wheel slippage in the front, it pulses this clutch pack on via the solenoid that we showed you before and sends power to the back wheels as needed. However, this is what we have. That's your output shaft and ring gear, and this set of splines to this clutch hub, which it no longer is working. Hey everybody, John at IPD. Today we have a Subaru 4EAT. As I tell a lot of people, the 4EAT isn't a 4EAT. There's a whole bunch of different versions of it, different gear ratios, etc., etc. So this is an old school one. This has a band in it. This is out of a 1992 SVX. All right, so typically these could be made stronger. This is, some people call it a phase 0. Most people call it a phase 1. But for the sake of comparison, if you see here, again, we have a band adjusting nut. On the other versions, you're going to have a spin-on filter on it. And the dimensions are roughly the same. They're both about 35 inches. So what some people do is swap the earlier version into a later vehicle if it's a real high horsepower application, but you need some electronics and things like that to run it. So anyway, let's take this apart and see what we have. All right, so usually I get rid of this stupidity first, all these cooler lines. On this you got to be careful. There's a spring and a ball in here. All right, so that's the one fitting in the front's going to have that. You know, washers on either side. As far as all that other stuff, we have this bolted here. You know, just your cooler lines, no big deal, but this is important here. We have this little piece that locks your differential adjuster. So I've seen people leave these out and this thing will unscrew and it will come apart and blow up your diff. So always make sure you put these little tabs back in, you know, if you're messing with one of these. So as usual on these Subarus, I start at the back because there's a nut on the pinion on most of them that you're gonna have to take apart to get this thing apart. Taking that sensor out. And oftentimes these older ones suck. They have gaskets that don't really like to come off. So there's like a lot of grinding and stuff like that usually. Okay, so we have our all-wheel drive clutch solenoid here. And that's just a tab. You depress it, disconnect it. But this is what I'm talking about, this gasket. These are, it's a lot of work and kind of a pain to get this all cleaned up, but we may skip past some of that so I don't subject you guys. Okay, looks like we have a problem here. This is our all-wheel drive clutch pack, and as you can see, something went wrong, and this wearing into that. And you have these splines, you can see the of them here. Okay, so with that said, you could find a socket that fits. I'm not sure what size it is, but this is a special Subaru socket that's just for the pinion nut. So that's got to come off because this pinion goes all the way through to about there. All right, so we're going to take this bracket off. It's a nut and bolt. You can see we have a ground strap on one of them, and that goes to your firewall. And the rest are just, 14s, which are usually best got with a swivel. And the bottom two, we're going to have to wrench out. All right, so these bottom bolts typically need to get wrenched out. All right, so these are like glued on with silicone. So once you have all the bolts out, you got to kind of break that all loose. Which sometimes is a pain and sometimes is not so bad. Now you have some more 14s under here. And these are for your pinion bearing retainer. So once those come out, you want to turn this around. And these are usually on here fairly tightly. Oh, made a liar out of me. So you're going to have a pinion, and you typically have 1 or 2 shims here, and that's to set your pinion depth. But if you're not changing ring and pinion or anything like that, you don't need to worry about any of that. So next is to get your pump off. I have 2 breathers up here. One is for the transmission section and one is for the differential section. As you guys probably know, the differential's a separate fill with 75 W90 gear oil, and the transmission's a ATF fill, and we recommend Dextron 6, by the way, which is GM's I guess latest and greatest spec. And these could kind of be difficult to get off as well. And you have some dowel pins that hold them in there, and sometimes that's the difficulty with getting them out. But this looks like this one's not going to give us too much trouble. So that's your pump housing, your input shaft. And this, the older style Phase 0, Phase 1, whatever you'd like to call it, uses a lot of parts that are in common with the Nissan RE4, so like Pathfinder transmissions and things like that. A lot of these parts interchange. They're not exclusive to Subaru. Loosen that band adjustment. Steel shim gasket. Obviously, we're not reusing that. It's your 2/4 bands to get you second and fourth, and it's kind of burnt. And when those bands burn, they can mess up this drum. So we're gonna have to change this. It's got some unpleasant texture on it that we're not gonna want to reuse it. These are your reverse input clutches. These look like they're starting to burn a little bit as well. These are your direct clutches. Oh, maybe somebody worked on this before. It's like we got somebody left us a note. These are your 3/4 clutches, and they're usually a source of problems. Yeah, they're starting to burn. We have what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in here. I could usually get 6 or 7 when I build them. It's going to increase the torque capacity some. Sun gear. 2 planetaries. Another sun gear and a bearing. Okay, we have in here a ring gear, a one-way clutch, or sprag if you prefer to call it that. There's a washer on either side of it. What just fell out is our band strut. Okay, so that kind of sits like that. So when you put it in gear, these just come on and stay on, and forward, come off and reverse. And then down here we have coast clutches. So what they're going to do is if you're not in fourth, you pull the shifter down to third, it's going to give you engine braking. And these usually don't have anything wrong with them. We have a set of low reverse clutches down in here. And these you're not going to usually find anything wrong with them. You know, we change them anyway, but they're usually not a source of problems. Some ugliness there. Okay, so we'll get a shot of this mess. In case you guys are working on one, you can see where all this stuff goes. All right, so all these bolts are 10, but not all of them have to come out. If you're working on a Nissan or something like that, they're all the same color, but Subaru is nice enough to make all the ones that you got to take out to remove the valve body a different color, for the most part. You have a ground strap on this bolt. And this is not factory. Somebody wrapped this around here. Okay, so this is our valve body stuff. It's all free. But we're going to have to take these connectors off. And these aren't so bad. Have a different style tab. And they can get pretty brittle. So this is something that works on any transmission. If you're working on something old and crusty or uncooperative, if you just hit them with a heat gun a little bit, you're definitely not melting them. You're just trying to make them a little more supple. If you heat them with the heat gun, sometimes they're a lot more cooperative when you go pull them apart. And again, this applies to anything, even under your hood or whatever. Oh, you guys have turbo cars and everything under that hood gets baked and crusty from all the heat. And it doesn't take much. A little bit goes a long way. All right, so we'll get this whole mess out of the way. You got a solenoid pack on the bottom. You know, obviously if you had to change solenoids on this, it's going to require removing the valve body. Other than that, you have some accumulator pistons and springs. And we have a servo here, which may or may not want to come out easily. That doesn't work. That way always will. have is a ring tower, a bearing, and a return spring that gets captured under here. All these bolts, and each one of them has a little flat washer on it. And what's left is the piston down in here. Next, we have the pump. The bearing, plastic washer, 12mm bolts. And for those of you who work on transmissions, you're going to recognize this as being kind of like your 700 R4 or 4L60E type vane pump. That's the same stuff, rings, vanes. The part that's a little different is the slide. All right, because you have this arm that is going to move your pump slide. And the other difference would be on this spring, you have a little seat that sits on the end of it. But other than that, this is the same as your GM offerings for the most part. All right, so this is one of the issues that we ran into here, one of the main issues. You know, we had some burnt clutches. The customer's complaint is that it had third gear only. So, you know, it saw a problem and went into limp mode. So this is your output shaft that goes to your back wheels. This is your transfer clutch pack, they call it. This is your output shaft and output ring gear for the transmission. So basically, this gear engages with the pinion, sends the power up front. If you have a Subaru, you know they're pretty much front wheel drive all the time. As it sees wheel slippage in the front, it pulses this clutch pack on via the solenoid that we showed you before and sends power to the back wheels as needed. However, this is what we have. That's your output shaft and ring gear, and this set of splines to this clutch hub, which it no longer is working. You know, just for context, this is a different year. This is out of a Phase 2 unit. This is supposed to be one piece. You can't move this clutch hub from that gear. Okay, so what we're going to have to do to fix this thing is to find this part, which may be difficult because this thing is made in 1992 and there may not be too many replacement parts out of there available, and you have different tooth counts. So you're going to have to find this in the right tooth count because they're not all the same. This happens to be out of an SVX, which is kind of rare. And I guess in addition to that, I'll just show you the clutch pack that engages to give you your all-wheel drive. And you have a little bearing that sits in here as well. Okay, these are your transfer clutches. And It's common when these things run into problems, they have what they call tight corner braking. So it'll feel like you have a Jeep with your transfer case in 4 high on a dry road. Like it'll kind of hop around when you're making a tight turn and things like that. So there's a multitude of things that cause it, bad solenoids, or sometimes the clutch pack goes bad. But if you're going to change this clutch pack, you want to use OEM parts, because if you don't, sometimes they have chatters and you know, unusual drivability problems, you know, that happen when you're doing that tight cornering. So again, this is one of our main problems, so we're going to have to hope for the best in regards to finding this piece. Wish me luck.